What's going on, guys? Sticks here from the Token Minorities, bringing you another deck on Pokemon TCGO, and today I am bringing you a deck centered around Solgaleo-GX from Sun and Moon. And before I get into the deck, just a reminder that if you guys like this video or found it helpful, please leave a like, drop a comment, and maybe subscribe. It really does help us out a lot and lets us do more for you guys. And as for the question of the day, whenever a new set comes out, I try to do decks centered around every single one of the significant cards from each set. I mean, unless a card is just complete garbage, and even then, I still make an attempt. But when I'm making the decks for each set, I look at the card and think, okay, what support would best make this deck shine? And 90% of the time, I try to make it a standard deck. However, in some instances, I feel that a card is just so much better in expanded than it is in standard, so I do make a deck centered around them in expanded as opposed to the usual standard. And my question of the day is, do you guys like that? Do you guys want to see me do decks centered around cards in the format that I feel that they can best shine and do the most work? Or would you rather me just do it all in standard for a new set? So let me know if you guys would rather see me do just standard or whatever format I feel that the card would be most successful in, and why in the comment section below. Honestly, I'm more inclined to try to let the cards shine as best they can, and thus I want to do the deck in the format that I feel the card would do the best in. So take Solgaleo-GX for example. There is almost zero metal support in the current standard meta, and if anything, metal is a very, very anti-meta type. In fact, well, not anti-meta. The meta is very much against it in a lot of different ways, as opposed to, well, except for like Mega Mewtwo, but that's fallen out of favor anyway. But either way, what I saw Solgaleo, I saw that it's a metal type, that you discard energy from it, and I thought that this would be a perfect pairing with the Phantom Forces Bronzong, which is in expanded, which is why I decided to do Solgaleo in expanded. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. I would love to hear what you guys think. But anyway, on to the deck. Like I said, centered around Solgaleo-GX, 250 HP, massively, massively bulky. Ability Ultra Road. Once during your turn, you may switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. Honestly, I think that this is just a much superior rush-in, because you don't have to bring this Pokemon active. You can bring any other Pokemon that's on your bench active and switch it with your active Pokemon. I think that that is just a much, much better ability. Granted, it's on a stage 2, so it won't be able to be splashable like Keldeo EX is. But either way, the fact that Ultra Road is on this Pokemon just frees up a spot in this deck that was normally reserved for Keldeo. So I think Solgaleo really was just designed to be a partner with Bronzong, particularly with its main attack, Sunsteel Strike. For 3 energy, does 230. That is absurd. 3 energy, 230. I don't care what the added effect is. Okay, I care if the added effect is like you immediately lose the match, or your opponent gets 2 prize cards as well. But the fact that it does 230 for 3 energy with no game-breaking negative effects, that is just gigantic. That is incredible. And the effect is discard all energy from this Pokemon. Okay, that's to be expected. You can deal with that for such a relatively low energy cost for such an incredibly high amount of damage. And I would like to point out, with a Muscle Bland, with a Muscle Band, this thing KOs everything. I mean, it just destroys everything that's not Wailord with a Fighting Fury belt. So Sunsteel Strike is amazing. And then Soul Burst GX for a single energy. Search your deck for up to 5 energy card and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. Then shuffle your deck. This, I mean, it's not my favorite GX attack, but it definitely has some viability in certain situations. If I'm being honest, I have not used Soul Burst GX. I have not used it yet when I've been testing with this deck. I mean, I might get the chance to use it today, we'll see. But I feel like Bronzong Acceleration is fine. It's all you need for this Pokemon, so I don't use Soul Burst that much. However, I would like to also point out, Soul Burst just says energy. It doesn't say basic energy, so you can theoretically attach all 4 DCE in one turn with Soul Burst GX. So I think that that could potentially have some synergy with other stuff in the future. But in this particular deck, I'm not going to be using Soul Burst GX, if at all. I mean, I might, but probably not. But either way, focusing on Sunsteel Strike and Ultra Road, those things just hit so hard, and I love it. Solgaleo is just so ridiculously bulky. The other Pokemon that I'm running in this deck, Shaymin, because, I mean, Shaymin, draw support. Aegislash, one thing that you run into a lot in Expanded is Night March. Now, I know Night March has disappeared a little bit since Karen came out, but the thing is, not a lot of people are using that in their decks, and especially because it costs you your supporter for the turn. Karen just isn't run a lot. Aegislash is such an excellent wall to Night March. Forces them to Lysandre around or play Hex Maniac or Escape Rope. Basically, it forces them to use resources if they want to be able to attack Aegislash-EX. And in situations where your opponent isn't able to play those, well, you bought yourself a turn, and that is exactly what this deck needs. This deck is very slow, but once it gets set up, it can compete with almost any other deck out there just because of the synergy all of these Pokemon have. So Aegislash is a good backup attacker and a way of dealing with, well, not only, I guess, yeah, it can deal with Sylveon, or not Sylveon, Glaceon, but also it can help stall with Night March, which is the main reason it's in the deck. The big synergy between Solgaleo-GX is with the Bronzong, because Sunsteel Strike, you discard energy, and Bronzong, you attach metal energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon, especially with Hyper Road. You can just go ahead and Hyper Road, put Solgaleo back on the bench, Metal Links to it, and then just bring it right back active with like a Float Stone or another Hyper Road or something like that. So great synergy between these two. We are running 3-3-1 of Bronzor, Bronzong, and Bronzong Break. This Bronzong Break is here, again, for the Night March matchup, being able to discard energy and then hit for 30 based on each energy you discarded, and you can place them however you want. Phenomenal for the Night March matchup, but that is the only reason that this card is there. If you want, and actually I would kind of recommend running a 2-1-2 of Cosmog through Solgaleo, and then a 4-4-1 of Bronzor and Bronzong, and then throw Genesect in over Magearna. But the reason I'm running the line in this deck is because I wanted this deck to be fully centered around Solgaleo and not let anything else shine, so that's why I ran a little bit heavier line. However, if you try this deck, I'd recommend cutting 1-1 and then putting 1-1 into the Bronzongs, just because those are the engine of the deck for every single attacker. As for the last Pokemon, you got a Magearna-EX, just because Mystic Heart. Prevent all effects of your opponent's attacks except damage done to each of your Pokemon that has metal energy attached to it. Good for things like Bubble and other paralysis and poison moves that might be running around in Expanded. Just a nice little tech card in a metal deck. As for the items, you might notice I'm not running any Battle Compressor. That's because with a combination of Computer Search and Ultra Ball, I have plenty of ways to discard metal energy. Oh, and Juniper, I should add that too. But with Computer Search, Ultra Ball, and Juniper, I have plenty of ways of discarding metal energy. I don't really need to Battle Compress or anything away. Although one combination I would like to point out in the Expanded format is the combination of Battle Compressor and Lily on turn 1 being able to net you 2 more cards, which is very, very strong. However, I just didn't really find room for it in this deck. Computer Search, 100% the trainer of choice, just to get you that rare candy when you need it, the Bronzong when you need it. Overall, just the best A-Spec. 2 Level Ball to help get out your Bronzor and Bronzong, but also to get out Cosmog and Cosmoem, so pretty nice what you can get out with Level Ball to get this deck going. 2 Max Potion, because with Solgaleo, it's not going to get knocked out in one hit. I mean, unless you're up against a fire deck, Solgaleo's not going down in one hit, so your opponent will have to do like 2-3 hits in order to knock it out. Well, Sunsteel Strike, discard all energy, hit for an absurd amount of damage. Great, but now Solgaleo has no energy on it. Max Potion with absolutely no drawback. Metal Links the energy back onto it and go from there. So great synergy with these guys. 2 Rare Candy to go immediately from Cosmog into Solgaleo. 1 Sacred Ash in case something gets knocked out or you have to Juniper away a bunch of Bronzong. Really just to recover from whatever Pokemon go down while this deck is getting set up. 1 Startling Megaphone to get rid of those pesky Fighting Fury Belts and other things that could be a problem. 3 Trainers Mail to help with consistency. 4 Ultra Ball to get guaranteed whatever we need and also get metal energy in the discard pile. 4 via Seeker to reuse all of our supporters. And as for the supporters, running a 4-2 of N and Sycamore, or not Sycamore, Juniper, sorry, I'm so used to playing in Standard, but N and Juniper can play Sycamore because it's legal. You can play Sycamore because it's legal in Expanded. 1 Lysandre because Lysandre is awesome. 1 Hex Maniac to hopefully like slow down some starts. I mean, really what this deck is about is surviving and setting up. Hex Maniac does help slow your opponent's start down to where you can get set up in a decent amount of time. Gives you an extra turn to get set up if you need it. To Skyfield as the stadium of choice, just because, I mean, you're going to play a bunch of things down, and Shaymin, you're going to play Shaymin, but later you want that spot for a Bronzong. Skyfield gives you the extra spots you need, and once your opponent counters the stadium, get rid of the Shaymin. Works out great. 2 Float Stone for our Bronzongs, good synergy with Hyper Road. Bring the Float Stone Pokemon active, Metal Links back onto the Solgaleo, and then retreat for free back into the Solgaleo to attack, and then 10 Metal Energy, because, I mean, that's exactly what this deck thrives on. So, yeah, that is the deck, and I'm done rambling. Let's just go ahead and see it in action. Alrighty, we have found one against Mr. Luigi XOXO, so it looks like Mr. Luigi is giving me hugs and kisses, which I always appreciate. We do flip the coin, and we do get Tails, because Tails never fails, so we will get to go first, which is what you always want to do with this deck, and we actually get a very, very nice start. I get a Bronzor, I get a Cosmog, I have a Level Ball, I have Juniper to discard Metal Energy, and I have a Shaymin. And okay, we see a Fortress and a Roller Skates and a Super Scoop Up, so I really hope my opponent isn't running this, but either way, it kind of looks to me like my opponent is running that, yeah, okay. It's the exact deck that I thought it was. It's like the, what is it? It's the deck with Latios and Fast Raid and Pineco, where you just try to immediately get off a Fast Raid and, like, bench your opponent out before they can even play anything. So what I am going to do, go ahead and play another Cosmog down, play the Metal Energy onto my Cosmog on the bench, Skyfield, and then Shaymin for a fresh 6 cards. So really the fact that I'm going first is going to help me a lot with the fact that my opponent won't be able to bench me out, or hopefully won't be able to bench me out. And then what I'm going to do is attach Float Stone, go ahead and Level Ball, grab my other Bronzor, so I can have just as many Pokemon set up on this first turn as possible. Shaymin again, get 3 more cards, and this is a very, very, very good first turn for me. And I get a Solgaleo, which I don't want to have to discard, and I also don't want to have to discard use 2 VS Seekers in 1 turn, and okay, so I get a very, very nice hand for next turn. What I think I'm going to do is 1 metal in the discard pile. I'm going to retreat, save the Float Stone, go ahead and retreat, and I think into just another Bronzor. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that, let this Bronzor get knocked out by my opponent's Fast Raid, and then just kind of go from there. If I can withstand the initial onslaught by my opponent, I will have way too much bulk for my opponent to be able to completely knock out my, my Solgaleo, my Bronzongs, my Shaymins. My opponent, I think, well, not what I think. What I have seen is my opponent's deck is simply okay, let's get a bunch of cheap first turn wins by playing Forest of Giant Plants, with Fortress that spreads around 10 damage, and then with Pineco, because you can obviously evolve it, and then Super Scoop Up to bring it back up, Muscle Band, Kukui, Giovanni's Scheme, all those like damage boosting cards to where you can hit for a good amount of damage first turn. The fact that Bronzor is in my active instead of Shaymin means that my opponent, unless he gets some like crazy, gets all 4 Pineco set up and then gets a couple Super Scoop Up, then he won't be able to take knockouts on my benched Bronzor and Cosmog, which is really what I have to hope for. My opponent actually gets rid of a Fortress, so that is really great for me. We see the Pineco come down, and honestly, against this deck in particular, all you have to do is survive the first turn, and then they run out of steam really, really quickly, which is kind of what I'm going to be going for. And then we even see the plus power, so yeah, my opponent's just going to put all his resources into a first turn, try to knock out as many Pokemon as possible. Ultra Balls for a Shaymin, so we both are going to have a Shaymin for 6 turn 1, which is very, very nice. And see the Muscle Band there. So we will be able to 100% knock out the Bronzor this turn. And yeah, I can see running 2 more, another line of Bronzor and Bronzong as opposed to the 3-1-3 line of Solgaleo that I am running. I don't know. I wanted to make sure that this showcase was all about Solgaleo and that nobody else stole the spotlight, and that's what I'm going to go with. So, alright, we do see the Kukui. Luckily, my opponent only gets 2 cards off of that, the 20 damage. It's not going to matter anyway because, I mean, Bronzor was already going to be knocked out by a Fast Raid with a Muscle Band, and I think... Well, alright, so Puzzle of Time. I really hope my opponent doesn't get an immediate double puzzle, because that would just make me cry, and then there'd be nothing I could do about it. So we will see. Okay, my opponent does just rearrange the top 3 cards of their deck. That is phenomenal. That means their turn is very likely over unless they have another Shaymin. See the Forest of Giant Plants allows me to discard one of my Shaymins, and yeah, I'm so glad I played that Shaymin turn 1. Just kind of went balls to the wall, as it were. And we do see the initial Fortress going to be able to spread some good damage around, and this Bronzor is going down anyway to a Fast Raid. And yeah, so that was turn 1. We survived turn 1 for my opponent. My opponent luckily only got 1 prize. I am going to promote the Float Stoned Bronzor. Go ahead and evolve into Bronzong and Solgaleo, and I will, if I draw a regular Metal Energy, I will be able to go ahead and do a Sunsteel Strike this turn because of Metal Links. And let's see, do I want to Startling Megaphone, or do I want to discard the Lysandre and the Megaphone with my Computer Search? Yeah, the Latios is going to be knocked out anyway by a Sunsteel Strike. I want to 100% make sure that I have that available to me this turn. So what I am going to do is Computer Search. Do I want to Computer Search for a Metal Energy or Cosmoem? I think the play is Cosmoem, because I will be able to Juniper for 7 cards, and I want to go ahead and prevent my opponent from being able to, like, just crazy stuff with Fortress, get all of the low HP Pokemon out of harm's way on my bench. And okay, there we go. I do draw into the Metal Energy, which is what I was afraid of. Yes, I could have potentially not drawn into it, at which point my play would have bitten me in the butt, but I figured I had enough Pokemon that I really wouldn't have to worry about it. And what I can't even do is Ultra Ball, get rid of the Trainers Mail and the regular Metal to get another Bronzong, get another Metal Links going. And see, at this point, as long as I have a manual attachment for the turn, I will be able to just have Sunsteel Strike after Sunsteel Strike. I'm just going to go ahead and put the Shaymin and the other Bronzor back in my deck. Metal Links onto the Cosmoem on the bench, and yeah, just have another potential Solgaleo ready next turn. And then let's go ahead and Sunsteel Strike, destroy this Latios-EX, take 2 prizes, and really, I don't think... Yeah, my opponent will be focused on small attacks that rack up, but as long as I have a Max Potion, which I even get that there, so even if my opponent gets another Latios with a Muscle Band and a Kukui and Thorn Tempest and all that, I'll be able to just Max Potion off the damage, Hyper Road my Solgaleo back to the bench, heal, well, power it back up, and go from there. So really, Solgaleo is a very strong deck in Expanded, in my opinion. In my opinion, I think it's a very strong deck. Is it top tier competitive? No. I would not say it's top tier competitive, but I do think that it has potential to take on a good amount of different decks, because once you withstand the initial onslaught, you hit for tons of damage and you are very, very difficult to knock out, especially with like Max Potion and all of that. So I think this is a very cool deck that you guys should try. We do manage to win the first game because, again, we survived the first turn and my opponent couldn't do much after that. So yeah, that was the first match. Really got to show off Solgaleo getting a Sunsteel Strike off turn 2, which is the goal of this deck. And you know what? That wasn't nearly enough. Let's go ahead and try to find another one. Alrighty, we have found another one against Total Comic, and ladies and gentlemen, we are going up against Night March, or at least a very similar to Night March looking deck. I mean, I can't imagine... I mean, yeah, there are like Manectric Bats decks and stuff like that, but I think the majority of the time, if you face a Psychic Lightning and normal deck on the expanded ladder, it's going to be Night March. We do lose the coin flip, but yeah, that confirms that it is Night March because they let us go first. We start with... Okay, once again, we get a pretty solid start. Aegislash is going to be 1000% a priority in this first turn. I mean, I need to get that thing out and get that thing active as quickly as possible, because that will allow me to stall for the time that I need in order to set up to have a chance against Night March. I mean, Aegislash and the Bronzong Break are the 2 techs that I run for Night March, and hopefully those guys will be enough. What is unfortunate is that it looks like I'm going to have to Juniper first turn, which is, well, Juniper first turn is not bad. The bad part is I'm going to have to Juniper away 2 VS Seekers unless I get an N, which, okay, I don't. I'm not even going to bother grabbing the Sky Field because I want to be able to counter the Stadium later. And I'm going to have to discard 2 VS Seekers turn 1. Very, very unfortunate for me. What I am going to do is Trainers Mail immediately whiff completely. And here's the situation. So I'm going to Ultra Ball, get rid of the Lysandre and the other Metal Energy. Do I want to grab a Shaymin or an Aegislash? I think at this point I'm going to Shaymin. I'm playing the Magearna. I don't need it in this matchup, but I want to draw as many Pokemon, or as many cards as possible off the Magearna to hopefully draw into a not Bronzong, an Aegislash. So I do get another Ultra Ball, which is great for me. I am just going to grab that Aegislash, and I have the Float Stone too, but I think the play is to retreat. That way I have more Metal Energy in my discard pile, and also leave the Float Stone to be able to play it on Aegislash later if I'm somehow able to get up and attack next turn on something. I really doubt it because all of my attacks require energy, none of which I'm able to... Well, all of my attacks require 3 energy, and I'm only able to get 2 at the absolute most this next turn. So Aegislash is going to have to buy me some time. Luckily, my opponent will have to waste a Hex Maniac or a Lysandre. Basically, what I'm saying is my opponent will have to waste their supporter for the turn if they want to be able to attack, and especially the fact that they put it on the Mew, put the DCE on the Mew, means that my opponent, well, obviously does not have the Hex Maniac. Otherwise, otherwise it would shut off their opponent's Mew and they wouldn't be able to attack anyway. But also, actually, I think my opponent really just should have played it onto the Joltik. I don't know why they played it onto the Mew, because Aegislash has resistance even if my opponent is able to hit anyway. And I think, well, the fact that my opponent played the DCE on the Mew means that I'm going to be able to survive this turn. My opponent will not be able to hit me unless they have like some crazy escape rope switch combination, because one thing my opponent could have done is also play an escape rope and attack with the Joltik on the bench. But again, because the DCE is on the active Mew, I will be able to survive this turn without taking any damage at all, and my opponent just retreats into the Joltik, so that's a pretty interesting play. One way that my opponent can work around Aegislash is to play a Dimension Valley and play a single energy onto the Mew, and this is very unfortunate because I'm going to have to Juniper away yet another VS Seeker. So right now I am down to 1 VS Seeker for the rest of the game. I don't even draw anything particularly good. What I am going to do is just go ahead and Startling Megaphone, just because, I mean, I might as well. Go ahead and Metal Links onto... Do I want it on the Cosmog or the Bronzong? I think I'm just going to go ahead and start powering up the Cosmog for a potential Sunsteel Strike later. And yeah, I didn't draw into anything I need. I hopefully can draw into like a Max Potion next turn, and there my opponent does get the Hex Maniac. Will be able to Night March me for some solid damage, but luckily Max Potion will come in very clutch, because even though my abilities are shut off this turn, I can go ahead and Max Potion up the Aegislash, heal off all that damage, force my opponent to have a Lysandre or another Hex Maniac next turn if they want to attack, and even shut off Shaymin for my opponent. I am just going to go ahead and Juniper, hopefully draw into my Cosmoem or some way of getting it, which I do. Trainers Mail, see what I can get. I get an Ultra Ball and a Float Stone. I think I'm just going to grab the Ultra Ball and then Ultra Ball away the Metal and the Ultra Ball, the other Ultra Ball, to grab a Cosmoem. That way I can have a Solgaleo next turn. And Aegislash is putting in so much work right now. I mean, it is buying me the time that I need to set up, and once I get set up, I'll be able to destroy Night March. I mean, Metal Toolbox, I mean, just destroys Night March once it gets set up. However, if Night March can outspeed it, then I have no chance. But the fact that Aegislash is buying me the time I need, I do have a chance. And also, Bronzong Break is going to be invaluable in this match anyway. We do see that my opponent decides to play the Sycamore for the turn, which means that my opponent will not be able to take a knockout this turn. Well, unless they have an escape rope, at which point I would be very, very sad, because that means my opponent would be able to take a knockout in a turn that I look to be in a good position. And I do go ahead and get put in an even better position, because I get a Metal Energy, I get a Solgaleo. I am going to go ahead and Ultra Road into my Bronzong. That way I can Metal Links onto my Aegislash, and I'll be able to take the first knockout of this game which the big boon of Night March is the fact that it gets powered up quickly and can hit for tons of damage immediately. But I'm going to be able to take the first knockout of the game with my Bronzong deck. So that is very, very awesome. I'm going to Metal Links onto my Bronzong on the bench so I can start getting that thing powered up for a Metal Rain later, because I know I'm 100% going to need that. Let's go ahead and retreat into my Aegislash and take the knockout with Slash Blast on the Joltik, get rid of a DCE and a Fighting Fury Belt. So right now I've gotten rid of 2 Fighting Fury Belts from my opponent. That is huge in this matchup. That is ridiculously huge if I'm able to get rid of the Fighting Fury Belts, because that means that Metal Rain will be able to be used to its highest effectiveness, discarding 1 energy to knock out a Joltik, 2 to knock out a Mew, and 2 to knock out a Pumpkaboo. So I'm in a very, very phenomenal spot right now. And if my opponent can't knock out my Aegislash, well, I theoretically can just Max Potion off the damage again, and then Metal Links back in. So, I mean, I'm loving the position that I'm in right now. Unfortunately, I have so much energy that is probably going to get discarded, which is really not something you want in this situation. My opponent will just Ultra Ball, probably grab a... If my opponent has like a Joltik DCE and a Hex Maniac, he will probably be able to knock out my Aegislash's turn. Well, especially with that Battle Compressor, will be guaranteed. Yeah, there we go. We see the damage, and there go another Joltik and a Pumpkaboo. My opponent is actually running low on Night March attackers. So if I can snipe those out, the Mews will be worthless. The Mews are a very, very low priority right now. I don't need to take knockouts on them. And okay, we do see the Hex Maniac. We see the Joltik. So it looks like my opponent got a... Actually, didn't even play the Shaymin, so that's curious. But my opponent does have the DCE and into the Joltik, so we'll be able to knock out my Aegislash with a Night March. And I actually disagree with the fact that my opponent brought in a... I disagree with the fact that my opponent discarded a Pumpkaboo and a Joltik. I think you only needed to discard one of those. But what I am going to do, go ahead and Computer Search, get rid of 2 Metal Energies, I think is the play. Grab my Bronzong Break, because that thing is going to be ridiculously valuable right now. And then what I can do is retreat. Actually, I can't Metal Links. That's right, my opponent played a Hex Maniac. So what I think I'm going to do is play this Bronzong Break, play the Metal Energy onto it, retreat into the Bronzong Break, and then Metal Rain, knock out the Joltik and the Mew. Do I want to get the extra damage on the Mew, or do I want to keep the energy on Bronzong? I think the play is to just go ahead and get the damage where I can. This Bronzong will more than likely go down next turn. Well, in the event that my opponent can get a Night Marcher down. My opponent only has 1 Night March Pokemon left, and they have to be able to search that. And okay, I get an N. That's actually exactly the supporter that I want in this situation. Because, I mean, I can't Juniper, otherwise I'll lose, but I still want to draw cards, and my opponent runs... Well, first off, my opponent immediately gets another Joltik down, so that's... Wow, okay. Then my opponent's going to go ahead and Shaymin, get 5 more cards, and... This is looking tricky, because if my opponent knocks out my Bronzong, I will have to rely on Solgaleo to take the last couple prizes, and Solgaleo constantly discards cards. Well, discards all the energy, and with Metal Links, I have way too many energy in the discard pile. I'm not sure why I didn't Ultra Ball away my other Solgaleo instead of a Metal Links. My opponent does just Lysandre in the Shaymin. Ooh, I think that was a big, big misplay by my opponent. I think that was a huge misplay, because now what I can do is I can go ahead and Metal Rain, knock out 2 Joltik and a Mew. Man, that's going to be huge. So let's go ahead and Float Stone up the Bronzong Break, attach the regular Metal, and my opponent's going to be N to 2. So this, I mean, that turn worked out incredibly for me. I know it looked like my opponent has the edge because they only have 2 prizes left, and they were able to take a knockout that led to 2 prizes, but really not knocking out a Bronzong, I think, is going to be the play that will win me the game. I really do think that, because what I can do is Metal Links onto my Bronzong Break. Maybe. Oh, don't do this. Don't do this. Okay, there we go. Alright, so we will be able to Metal Links onto the Bronzong Break. And TCGO is starting to slow down for me. No, please don't. This was such a great match. Please don't do this right now. Don't kick me out. I'm in a winning spot. Even though my opponent only has 2 prizes left, I was able to end them down to 2. I'm going to be able to take out the Mew and the last 2 remaining Night Marchers that they have. And please, please. Oh, thank you, Lord. And then I am just going to Metal Lynx one more time onto my Bronzong Break. And I'm really glad I put the 30 damage on the Mew earlier, because even though I know it didn't technically matter, because theoretically I would still have... Oh, I mean, I would still have another energy on this Bronzong to where I'd be able to knock out the Mew anyway. What I can do is just go ahead and discard 5 energy, knock out the Mew, and knock out both Joltik for a 3 prize turn. And okay, I need another energy. Otherwise I think I might lose, because if my opponent takes... So if okay, theoretically my opponent will get a Night Marcher, but I mean, I end them to 2. We do see the Prism come down. So, okay, that's fine with me. All my opponent's Night Marchers are in the discard pile, so theoretically... Let's just say, worst case scenario, my opponent manages to double puzzle and knock out a Bronzong. They would go down to 1 prize. I'd have to promote Solgaleo. Well, I'd have to promote Bronzong, Metal Lynx onto Solgaleo. Let Solgaleo try to live a hit, and then take a knockout. And then if my opponent has a Lysandre, I just lose. So, I mean, I'm just assuming worst case scenario. My opponent will be able to get 2 energy back, plays a Mew. Okay, they can't have a double puzzle. Well, first off, I want to point out that the guy... Oh, no. The puzzle's coming into play. Wait. Yes! My opponent just had to rearrange the top cards of their deck. I thought they double puzzled, and I thought I would just be completely screwed and I would lose. And my opponent has to use my GX attack on Solgaleo, and we will win this match because of Bronzong Break. And heck, I can even finish up this match with a Solgaleo. So that was very, very huge. I did have a couple misplays here and there, which I acknowledge. But fortunately, my opponent overextended a little bit too much by battle compressoring away too many Night Marchers to where I'm going to be able to win the game. Let's go ahead and Metal Lynx onto my Solgaleo. But what I was saying is what I'd have to do is just Metal Lynx once onto Solgaleo and then bring it active, let it take a hit, hopefully survive, and then... I mean, if my opponent had a Lysandre, then I would just lose. But what I can do right here, Ultra Road into a Sunsteel Strike, take the match against Night March, and... Oh, that was way, way too close for comfort. If my opponent had managed to knock out the Bronzong and they had another Lysandre, I think... Well, I mean, we would have just lost if my opponent managed to knock out that Bronzong and have another Lysandre. So, Solgaleo able to take the game. Aegislash and Bronzong Break both putting in a ton of work. And what's kind of funny is that even though Solgaleo only got 1 attack off the entire game, it is the MVP because it technically did the most damage. And even though I'd say Bronzong Break is the MVP, who am I to argue? Solgaleo, this deck is all about you. You the real MVP. You the real MVP. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. And this is Styx signing out. Why not? See you guys.